being the self-proclaimed Junkyard God wasn't all plasma swords and drone maintenance. Turns out, when you're the only one with reliable tech in a world held together by rust and desperation, you become tech support for, well, everyone. And let me tell you, a desperate scrapper trying to explain why their jury-rigged water purifier isn't working is a special kind of headache. So, when a faint, rhythmic energy signature started pinging on my long-range scanners, a relic I'd salvaged from a pre-collapsed satellite, naturally, I saw it as a golden opportunity. It was a chance to get away from Brenda and her perpetually malfunctioning nutrient paste dispenser. Brenda meant well, but explaining quantum entanglement to someone who still thought fire was magic was taxing. The center of the heap was legend. Scrappers whispered tales of magnetic storms that could rip apart your crawler, and of landscapes so choked with toxic fumes that your lungs would stage a revolt. No one went in, and no one came back out, which naturally made me curious. Probably just a busted comms tower, I'd muttered to Sparky, one of my more sentient sentry drones, who responded with a series of affirmative clicks that I may or may not have programmed him to do for moral support. My expedition vehicle was a labor of love, which I'd christened the Ironclad Optimist. She was built on the chassis of an old mining vehicle, reinforced with layers of plasteel plating. She sported heavy-duty magnetic shielding, enhanced atmospheric filtration, and enough weapon emplacements to make a small-time warlord jealous, all powered by a temperamental but powerful fusion core. "Overkill?" Brenda had asked, eyeing the multiple plasma cannons. "Sweetheart," I'd replied, patting a particularly nasty-looking railgun. "In the heap, there's just appropriately enthusiastic." The journey was exactly as unpleasant as the legends foretold. Magnetic anomalies made my navigation systems twitchy, forcing me to rely on old-fashioned triangulation and gut feeling. The mutated beasties were imaginative. Three-legged sandworms with bioluminescent mandibles have an unhealthy obsession with chewing on metal, it turns out. Sparky, Wrench, and Bolt earned their keep fending them off while I drove through the ever-thickening toxic smog. Just nature's way of saying, welcome. "Now please die," I'd cheerfully announce whenever the Geiger counter started clicking like an angry insect. Days blurred into a cycle of rumbling engines and crackling energy shields. The energy signature grew stronger, more insistent, like a heartbeat echoing through the junk-choked earth. It led me deeper into a region that looked less like a junkyard and more like the petrified remains of a colossal metal beast. Twisted frameworks of unimaginable machines clawed at the rust-colored sky. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, I reached the source. It wasn't a structure, but a vast crater, the ground within it a swirling vortex of iridescent energy. At its center floated a colossal crystalline structure, humming with power. It looked alien, ancient, and utterly unlike anything I'd ever seen. "Well, hello there, fancy light show," I muttered, parking the ironclad Optimist a safe distance away. "A bit more impressive than a busted comms tower, aren't you?" As I cautiously approached the edge of the crater, Appraisal flared to life, feeding me a torrent of data. Warning, unidentified energy source detected. Designation, core resonance matrix, potential system nexus. Status, dormant awaiting key sequence. Hypothesis, origin point for planet-wide system integration. System nexus? This wasn't just some random piece of tech. This could be the heart of the system that had inexplicably blanketed Xylos with medieval fantasy rules. Getting closer, however, proved to be a problem. As my boot touched the iridescent ground at the crater's edge, the air in front of me shimmered and a section of the ground rose silently, forming a 10-foot-tall obsidian pylon. Automated defense system activated. Threat detected. Unsanctioned entity. System suggestion. Apply Dispel Magic, spell matrix to nullify barrier. Dispel magic, huh? I mused. Right, let me just pull out my wizard's staff. I took a step back as the pylon emitted a low, threatening hum. This was a classic Tinker problem. The system wanted a fantasy solution, but I only had technology. The intent of Dispel Magic is to nullify an energy field, my sci-fi equivalent, an electromagnetic pulse. I jogged back to the Optimist, grabbing my toolkit and a handful of high-capacity capacitors I'd scavenged from an old railgun. This was what I lived for. Plasma edge crafting wasn't just for swords. It was for precision cutting. I carefully sliced open the capacitor casings, exposing the delicate arrays inside. Tinker let me see the pieces, the potential pathways for energy. I rewired them in a chaotic, beautiful loop, creating a feedback cascade designed to discharge all at once. New skill unlocked. EMP burst crafting. Level 1. You have learned to create a device that disrupts localized energy fields. The result was a spiky, ugly little device that looked like a metallic sea urchin. I walked back to the pylon, took a deep breath, and rolled it towards the base. Here goes nothing, I chirped. The device sparked, and a wave of invisible energy washed over the pylon. The obsidian construct flickered, its hum turning into an angry shriek, and then it sank back into the ground, defeated. The path was clear. See, magic is just science we don't understand yet. And I, for one, am an excellent student. I walked into the crater, the iridescent ground crunching softly under my boots. The energy in the air was thick, making the hairs on my arms stand up. I was halfway to the central crystal when a new set of pylons rose around me, trapping me in a circle. This time, the defense was different. A shimmering, transparent dome of energy formed over me, and the air began to thin, the temperature dropping rapidly. Atmospheric integrity field engaged. Threat containment protocol. Suffocation. System suggestion. Utilize ring of sustenance or similar enchanted item. Right, a magic ring. Knew I should have picked one up at the last intergalactic jewelry store. I deadpanned to myself, my breath already starting to fog. Panic was not an option. Analyze, translate, build. That was the Tinker's way. The barrier wasn't a solid wall, it was a projection. I needed to find the source. My appraisal skill, boosted by my Junkyard God class, scanned the field, a stream of data flooding my vision. The energy was originating from the pylons, but it was being focused and amplified by a series of hidden conduits running beneath the crater floor. The solution was obvious, if a little crazy. I couldn't dig through the floor, but I didn't need to. I needed a distraction, a very, very specific one. Back in the Optimist, I grabbed the parts for 3 new sentry drones, but these weren't for combat. Using plasma edge crafting, I didn't make weapons. I made tuning forks, shaping salvaged durasteel into precise resonant frequencies. I installed them into the drone's chassis, their power cores hooked directly to the forks. New skill unlocked. Resonance drone fabrication. Level 1. I deployed the drones, sending them to 3 specific points outside the barrier, directly above the hidden conduits I'd located. Okay, fellas, I muttered. Let's make some noise. I activated them, and they began to vibrate, emitting a high-frequency hum that was barely audible but shook my teeth in my skull. The energy dome flickered violently as the resonant frequencies interfered with its focusing conduits. It wasn't enough to break it, but it was enough to cause instability. Now for the final piece. I needed to overload one of the pylons. My plasma sword wouldn't do it. The barrier would dissipate the heat. But a focused, kinetic strike might work. I looked at the railgun mounted on the ironclad Optimist. Too big, too imprecise. I needed a miniature version. My eyes landed on a pile of scrap, a magnetic clamping unit, a series of copper coils, and a discarded hydraulic piston. It was beautiful. For the next 10 minutes, I worked in a feverish trance, my hands a blur. I wrapped the coils, calibrated the clamp, and jury-rigged a power cell. The result was a handheld magnetic accelerator, a crude but functional rail pistol. New skill unlocked. Kinetic accelerator assembly. Level 1. The dome was flickering wildly now, the drone vibrations causing it to groan and warp. I took aim at the base of the nearest pylon, where appraisal showed me a critical power junction. I fired. A single superheated rivet shot across the crater and slammed into the pylon. The structure shuddered, the energy dome dissolved into a shower of harmless sparks, and the pylons retracted. I took a deep, sweet breath of the toxic air. Never underestimate the power of percussive maintenance. Now nothing stood between me and the crystal. Embedded in its surface were thousands of tiny symbols, arranged in intricate patterns. They weren't runes, they were code. Binary. And the rhythmic energy signature wasn't just a pulse, it was a sequence. The system thought in fantasy, but it was built on logic. What if the key sequence wasn't an incantation but a composition? My hand instinctively went to the small, battered synth organ I kept in the ironclad Optimist, a relic I tinkered with in the quiet moments. It was hopelessly out of tune, but it was the only musical instrument I had. "All right, core resonance matrix," I said, a wide, manic grin spreading across my face as I set up the synth. "Let's see if you appreciate a little heavy metal." I cracked my knuckles, took a deep breath, and began to play.